The sun bled across the prairie sky like a wound that refused to heal. Its crimson rays stretched long and low over the Dakota plains, setting the clouds on fire and casting the settlement in an ominous glow. Dust hung thick in the air, heavy, as the silence that pressed on the wooden hall, where a gathering of men debated war or peace. Evelyn Hawthorne stood at the edge of the governor's lodge, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles gleamed white. She'd overheard whisper snatches of strategy, of tension, of blood not yet spilled but promised. It had been weeks of negotiations. The Lakota chiefs had ridden in with flint in their eyes and spears upright, a wall of solemn fury. The settlers met them with handshakes and rifles just out of sight. Peace was possible. Barely inside, her father, the territorial governor, paced the length of the lodge. Governor Charles Hawthorne was a man who bore the weight of civilization on his shoulders. Or so he liked to remind people. His voice was calm but strained, measured like a noose tightening. Across from him sat Chief Mapialuda, Red Cloud, eyes dark and unreadable beneath his feathered headdress. At the chief's side stood a man Evelyn had never seen before, taller than the rest, wrapped in deerskin and silence, with a broad chest and sharp cheekbones that caught the dying light like sculpted obsidian. That one, the interpreter said, gesturing at the stoic warrior, is Tokala. He fought at Ash Hollow. He bears no fear, only duty. Tokala didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on her father, unwavering, as if already weighing his soul. Something about his stillness made Evelyn feel like a page being read. The terms are simple, Red Cloud said through the interpreter. You want safe passage, a railroad, no more bloodshed. We want proof your words mean peace. The daughter of the governor married to Tokala, warrior of the Oglala. A blood bond, a treaty of flesh. Evelyn's heart sank into her stomach. She stared at her father, expecting instant outrage. She expected him to laugh, to storm out, to raise a flag or a fist. Instead, his mouth twitched. Not in anger, but in calculation. I won't agree to barbarism, he said slowly. Not unless... He looked at her. Really looked at her. The last shred of safety peeled away. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came. That night, the world changed. The wedding wasn't a ceremony. It was a transaction. There were no flowers, no veils, no piano hymns. Just a fire circle, a low chant, and the stony faces of two tribes holding their breath. Evelyn wore white knot satin, but simple linen that clung to her arms as the prairie. Wind whipped through the camp. Tokala stood beside her, unreadable, shoulders squared, eyes forward. He didn't speak as the elder tied their hands together with a strip of rawhide dot her father watched from a distance. Not once did he meet her gaze. When it was done, Tokala gave a single nod and turned away. He walked to a lodge prepared for them. Without waiting, the people cleared the circle in silence. Evelyn followed, her boots crunching on hard earth, her thoughts a cyclone. She wasn't a bride. She was an offering. Inside the tipi, a fire flickered low, casting shadows on stretched hides. Tokala sat cross-legged near the flame, sharpening a blade. He did not acknowledge her. He didn't need to. The message was clear. This marriage was only peace, not love, not comfort, and certainly not welcome. Evelyn removed her shawl and sat. Opposite him, spine straight, dignity clinging to her like perfume she refused to wash off. She wanted to speak, to say something cutting, something that would sting. But the words withered in her mouth. He looked up at last, his eyes meeting hers. You are not here by choice, he said in perfect English. She blinked. His voice was low, rough, but calm. No, she replied. And you? Tokala's lips pressed into a line. I fight for my people, not my happiness. Then we are well matched. Silence settled between them again. The fire crackled. Outside, the night stretched across the plains, filled with the distant howl of wolves and the whisper of wind through tall grass. The following days passed like smoke, uncertain, intangible. Evelyn walked among people who did not speak her language, who watched her with expressions ranging from pity to suspicion. The children stared, wide-eyed. The elders murmured. She tried to help, to carry water, to clean hides. Most turned her away. A few accepted her in silence. Tokala barely spoke. He rose before dawn, trained with other warriors, then vanished into the hills. He returned at dusk, ate alone, and slept far from her on the other side of their shared tipi. He was a man built of bone and silence. One afternoon, she tried to prepare a meal of bison meat. She botched it so badly, the smoke nearly choked her. A toothless old woman cackled and shooed her aside, laughing in Lakota. Evelyn laughed too, breathless. For the first time in days, something cracked inside her, something cold. It wasn't joy, not yet. But it wasn't despair either. That evening, as she sat outside watching the fire, Tokala approached with a piece of smoked meat and laid it beside her. "You'll starve if you keep cooking," he said without looking at her. "I was going for." "Dramatic effect," she muttered. His lips twitched barely. But it was there, the ghost of a smile. Later that night, the wind howled louder than ever. The tipi groaned in the gale. Evelyn curled in her blanket, sleepless. Tokala stood outside, staring into the dark. "What are you watching for?" she asked, stepping out. "Storm." He said simply, "You can't stop the storm." Tokala didn't answer. He glanced at her, then pointed to the north. "That line, see the clouds? That is not wind. That is warning." Evelyn stared. She saw nothing. But in his voice she heard certainty. She stood beside him in silence, unsure of what she feared more, the storm outside or the one growing inside her. She was starting to understand what it meant to see the world not as comfort, but as threat. What it meant to live always ready, always aware, to sleep light, to walk strong, to be a warrior, not because you chose to, but because peace was a fragile thing. That night she dreamed of home, of lace curtains and the smell of tea, of her sister singing by the piano. And then she dreamt of fire, of blood, of her father turning away. She woke with a gasp. In the shadows of the tipi, Tokala sat sharpening his blade again. "You dream loud," he said. Evelyn stared at him. "Do you?" He didn't answer. A week passed, then another. One morning, Tokala returned from a hunt with a deep gash on his arm. Evelyn ran to him before she could think better of it, kneeling beside him with shaking hands. "You're bleeding," she said. "It will stop. I need to clean it." He looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. But he didn't stop her. She cleaned the wound, wrapping it tightly. He winced once. She noticed the small twitch at the corner of his mouth and found herself smiling. "You make a terrible patient," she said. "You make a strange wife." Evelyn didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That night, they sat side by the fire, not speaking, not needing to. For a long time, she stared into the flames and wondered if perhaps peace wasn't a treaty between two nations, but two people learning not to be enemies. But the peace outside was thinner than the one between them. Whispers crept through the camp. Traders spoke of settlers encroaching farther west, of fences going up, of buffalo disappearing, of warriors angry that peace had only meant delay, not fairness. Evelyn felt it, the air changing. Something in Tokala's jaw clenched more often. His silences grew longer. And one night she heard it. Two warriors speaking low near the fire. "Waited long enough. The white men lie. We should strike." Evelyn froze in the shadows, their words chilling her more than the wind. She didn't sleep. She didn't move. She only listened until her heart pounded like war drums in her chest. Next morning, she told Tokala. His face turned to stone. But she saw it in his eyes. He already knew. And still, he said nothing. She wanted to scream, to shake him. Instead, she said, "If something happens, tell me." Tokala looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something close to fear flicker. In his eyes, "I would rather die," he said quietly, "and see peace fail." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't want to know. But as she sat in the tent that night, wrapped in buffalo hide and doubt, she realized something had shifted. Between them, she no longer feared him. She feared losing him, and she didn't know what terrified her more. Not yet. The wind howled over the snow-crusted hills like a mourning spirit, dragging sharp cold through the Lakota village. Evelyn pulled the wool shawl tighter around her shoulders, her fingers stiff and red with cold. It had been 2 weeks since the wedding, and every morning still felt like waking in another woman's life. The tipi, the snow, the silence, all of it felt borrowed, not hers. Her old world china tea sets, warm fireplaces, laughter behind lace-curtained windows seemed like a dream she'd once believed in. She had barely spoken with Tokala since their union. He rose before dawn, trained with the other warriors or hunted in the woods, and returned only when the sky had faded into hues of ash and blood. She tried not to watch him, tried not to wonder what he thought of her, this pale woman wrapped in furs, foreign in every way, but human. But that morning, when she emerged into the cold, she found him crouched beside the fire circle, boiling strips of deer hide in a pot of water and ash. His movements were exact, his focus unshakable. She lingered a moment too long, the snow crunching beneath her moccasins. He didn't look up. "If you stare, you should learn," he said, his voice as calm and cool as the snow drifting from the sky. Evelyn stepped closer, cautious. "You're cleaning hides?" He dipped a hand into the boiling pot, pulled out the softened strip, and began scraping it with a smooth bone. Not cleaning, tanning, for moccasins. His tone didn't invite conversation, but something in her resisted the silence that always lingered between them. "May I help?" she asked. Tokala looked up then, really looked. His gaze was not unkind, but it was careful, measured. After a pause, he gestured to a second bone scraper lying beside him. She knelt on the snow-dusted hide and mirrored his posture. The hide was slick, resistant. Her fingers ached from the cold, her wrists strained against the stiffness. Tokala worked with a rhythm, efficient and quiet. She struggled to find hers. Several times, the blade slipped, and the hide bunched beneath her grip. "You hold it like a teacup," he muttered. "I beg your pardon?" She blinked. He took her hand not roughly, but with the certainty of a man who knew how to shape a world with his fingers. He adjusted her grip, pressed her wrist at the correct angle. "Like this," he said. His touch lingered only a breath before he released her. But it was enough to make something in her chest stir warmth, startling and unwelcome in the cold. "I've never tanned anything in my life," she admitted, scraping again. "I can see that." A breath of silence. Then she smiled. It became their pattern. She began helping each morning quietly, without fanfare. Fetching water, hanging hides to dry, cleaning the tipi. At first, she earned only glances, then nods, then a quiet chuckle from an elder who caught her stumbling over a Lakota phrase. The women remained guarded, but less distant. The children stared less. She still felt foreign, but less like an invader, more like a traveler learning the language of a new land. Days passed in frostbitten rhythm. One morning, the village awoke to a heavy fall of snow. Drifts blanketed the lodges. Evelyn, breath fogging before her, emerged to gather firewood and found Tokala kneeling by their tipi, sharpening. His blade. His eyes swept the horizon with that same distant vigilance she was learning to recognize. "There are wolf tracks," he said without turning. "Fresh." She glanced toward the woods. "Will they come close?" "Sometimes, when hungry." She hesitated. "Should I stay inside?" "No." She waited for more, but he said nothing. She could never tell whether he was trying to protect her or test her. Later that day, she walked alone into the sparse woods beyond the camp, dragging a small sled for firewood. The trees stood like bones against the snow, brittle and ancient. She worked quickly, fingers numb, mind focused. Then she heard it, a crunch. Not of snow falling, but of paws. She turned. The wolf was lean, ribs like a washboard, eyes golden and starving. It crouched low between two trees, silent and waiting. She dropped the wood. Her legs refused to move. Her breath caught. The wolf inched forward, and then a flash and arrow flew from behind her, striking the snow at the wolf's feet. A second followed, this one grazing the creature's leg. The wolf howled and fled into the woods. Evelyn turned, breath ragged, stood there, bow still half raised, snow in his braids, eyes fierce. "Are you mad?" He growled. "Alone, without a weapon?" "I didn't know," she began. "You are not a child. You must act like one of us, not a settler girl chasing firewood for play." His anger was sharp, but it wasn't cruel. It was fear, worn-like. "Armor, I'm trying," she said. "I'm not like you, but I'm trying." He stared at her, breath heavy, then softer. "Next time, call for me. Wolves hunt the weak. You are not weak. But you are still learning." She looked at him. "Thank you for coming." He gave a curt nod and retrieved her scattered firewood. That night, they shared stew by the fire. He handed her the bowl, and she noticed his hand trembling slightly. "Not from cold. Do wolves scare you?" she asked. "No," he said. "But losing people does." They sat in silence, the air thick between them. Another week passed, then two. Her Lakota grew passable enough to barter, to greet, to smile at the children and be understood. Once she made a joke in Lakota at the fire circle, and an elder barked a laugh so loud she nearly dropped her plate. She felt pride surge like heat in her throat. She looked across the fire, and Tokala was watching her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes lingered longer than before. The days were harder now. The cold burned deeper. The food grew leaner. Men returned from hunts with less meat. Whispers swirled through the village like smoke settlers building fences closer than ever, cutting down forest without word. Some warriors spoke of it by the fireside, quiet but bitter. Tokala avoided the talk. But Evelyn heard enough. One night, she sat beside him as he stitched a tear in his leather jerkin. "Will there be war again?" she asked. He paused. "There's always war, even when there's peace." "You speak like a man who's seen too." "Much of it." He looked at her then. "You marry a Lakota warrior, and now you ask if I know war?" She flinched slightly, but he didn't mean it cruelly. He set down the jerkin and leaned back. "My brother, Hotal, was shot by a settler when he was 12. He was chasing a calf that strayed too close to a ranch. He didn't speak English. Didn't know the fence meant death." Evelyn's heart clenched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tokala nodded. "He had a dog named Peta." He was quiet a moment. Then he looked at her. "Do you fear me?" She searched his face. "No," she said honestly. "Not anymore." "Why not?" "Because I see your pain, and because I know my own." The silence between them deepened, no longer awkward, but reverent. Then, one evening, the snow began to melt, just a little. Enough for the icicles to drip. Enough for the sun to return, if only faintly. Evelyn woke early and stepped outside to see the land glimmering with frost, but breathing again. The children threw slushy snowballs. A woman sang while pounding cornmeal. For a moment, it felt like the village exhaled Dot, and that night, Tokala spoke first. "Do you miss your home?" he asked, voice quiet. She nodded. "Yes, but less than I did." He turned to her. "I think of leaving often, riding west, never stopping. Why don't you?" "My people would call it cowardice. And I do not think I could leave you behind anymore." The words stunned her. They weren't wrapped in poetry. They weren't whispered sweet. But they were honest, raw, and something inside her cracked, like ice splitting beneath morning sun. She stepped toward him, slowly, deliberately. "I didn't come here to fall in love," she said. "Neither did I," he answered. Their hands found each other. The fire between them was no longer metaphor. It was real, quiet, glowing, fierce. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but softer this time. Less like a blade, more like a kiss, and Evelyn realized something. She no longer counted the days since the wedding, because now she was counting the moments that made it matter. ChatGPT said, "The thaw came not with a whisper, but a snap, the kind that splits trees and makes the rivers groan under their own breaking." Spring bled into the Lakota camp slowly, revealing the bones of winter beneath. The snow shrank into patches, revealing frozen mud and long-buried antlers. Crows returned to perch on skeletal cottonwoods, their calls sharp and mocking. Evelyn stood outside the lodge, hands dusted with cornmeal, the sleeves of her deerskin dress rolled back. A woman now, not just in name or ceremony, but in spine. Her hands, once soft from piano keys and silver spoons, were now calloused and cracked. Her back no longer ached from bending over fires. She moved with the rhythm of the village, with purpose and instinct. There were moments she even forgot how foreign she was. But that morning, as the village buzzed with spring renewal, a tension ran beneath it, like a drum that hadn't yet been struck, but trembled in expectation. Whispers drifted with the smoke. Settlers had built a new road south of the river. They'd cut down sacred cottonwood groves. A bison hunt had returned lean. The warriors murmured of broken promises, of white men who said one thing, then took another. The treaty the marriage was supposed to mean peace. But peace was a brittle thing, and it was beginning to crack. Evelyn felt it in Tokala, too, in the way his shoulders stiffened at every report from scouts, in the way he sharpened his knife in silence after dinner. They no longer slept on opposite sides of the lodge. Not for weeks, no, but he had grown distant again, retreating into himself like a wounded animal sensing the return of old predators. He didn't speak of it, and she didn't pry. Not yet, but the silence between them now felt like a held breath, not a comfort. The tipping point came 3 days later. A Lakota scout rode in at dusk, horse lathered and eyes wide. He spoke urgently to the council, and words spread like fire on dry grass. A boy barely 15 had been shot near the river. Not by outlaws, not by raiders, but by a settler guarding his fence. The boy had strayed close to the land to gather watercress. He was unarmed. His body had been left beside the stream like an animal. The camp erupted in grief, then rage. Drums sounded. Smoke rose from council fires. Young warriors sharpened their spears. Old warriors retrieved war paint from beneath bundles wrapped in years of dust and silence. Evelyn stood on the edge of the fire circle, the flames flickering across her face. She could see the shift in the men who had fought and lost and buried too many sons. The circle that once bound two peoples in uneasy peace had cracked. Wide open, she searched for Tokala. He stood beside Chief Red Cloud, silent but upright. When his eyes met hers across the flames, they were unreadable. That night, she waited for him in the lodge. Waited until the moon hung low and the village grew quiet with exhausted anger. He entered without a word, his moccasins stained with ash. "They want war," he said finally, sitting beside her. "And you?" she asked, voice low. He didn't answer right away. His hand found his knife, tracing the handle as though it told stories only he could hear. "I want justice," he said. "But justice doesn't always wear the face of peace." She turned to him. "Do you believe the settlers will stop? If there's bloodshed, they'll retaliate. It won't end with one raid." His jaw clenched. "And if we do nothing, they'll take the river, then the hills, then the children." She reached out, placed a hand on his. "We have to find another way." He pulled his hand away, gently but firmly. "You are not one of them anymore. But you are not one of us either." The words cut deeper than she expected. She sat in silence as he rose and left again, vanishing into the dark. The next morning, she found him by the horse corral, tightening a saddle. His face was set. "You're going with the war party," she said. He didn't look at her, not to fight, to speak. "If there's any chance to stop what's coming, I must be there. You could be killed. I've already died once. When I married a woman I didn't want. When I buried my brother. This is just what comes after." She stepped in front of him. "And what am I, Tokala? Just a symbol to buy time?" He looked at her now, really looked. "You were a sacrifice. For them. For us. For peace. But somehow, you became more. And don't throw it away," she whispered. He pressed his forehead to hers, brief and firm. "If I don't come back, you are free." She didn't let him see her cry. Not until he was gone. The village was hollow without him, a bone picked clean. She kept to herself, grinding corn, sewing moccasins, tending to the children. But her ears never stopped listening. Her eyes never stopped watching the ridge where he had disappeared. 2 days passed. On the third, smoke rose from the southern hills. Riders returned bloodied, breathless. Some wept, some limped, and one did not return at all. Not Tokala. The world slowed. Her hands shook. She walked to the council circle and stood among the warriors, demanding answers in broken Lakota. One man pointed south. She didn't wait. She saddled Tokala's second horse, strapping a rifle to the side. She took nothing else. Just his knife, still sheathed near the fire pit. She tied her braid back and rode. The prairie opened before her, endless and wild. The wind screamed in her ears, pulling tears from her eyes. She rode hard and fast, heart pounding like hooves. She found the broken camp near dusk. Charred embers, blood in the snow, a torn matter. Tracks both horses and feet led toward the ridge. She followed them, rifle tight in hand. A groan cut through the wind. She dismounted, moving slow, low. Then she saw him, Tokala, slumped against a tree, blood on his side, eyes glazed but open. She ran to him. "Tokala," she breathed, cradling his head. He blinked slowly. "Evelyn?" "You're not dying," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "You're not," he coughed. "The men turned on me. They wanted blood. I told them to wait, to think. They called me traitor. I stopped two from riding into a settler camp." "You saved lives," she whispered. "Not enough." She tore his shirt, pressed fabric against the wound. "I'll get you home," she said. "Hold on." But movement caught her eye riders, distant on the ridge, settlers, armed. She rose, grabbed the rifle, stood in front of Tokala. A shot rang out wild, warning. She raised her arms. "Don't shoot." She screamed. "He's not the enemy." The riders slowed. One dismounted, approaching cautiously. She recognized him, Captain James Willoughby, one of her father's former escorts. "Evelyn?" he said, shocked. "What in God's name?" "He's injured. He needs help." James hesitated. "He's the enemy." "No," she said. "He's my husband. He tried to stop this. He's bleeding because he tried to stop you and them from starting another war." James stared at her, then nodded to a soldier behind him. "Fetch the medic." They carried Tokala down the ridge, bandaged him, fed him. Let her sit beside him through the night. He slept fitfully, hand wrapped around hers. By dawn, he was breathing easier, stronger. The settlers camped nearby, wary but no longer hostile. James pulled her aside. "You saved his life," he said. "No," Evelyn replied. "He saved mine. He showed me how to live without hate." James looked at her. "What happens now?" She glanced at Tokala, asleep in the dawn light. "That depends on all of us," she said. "But I won't let the circle stay broken." When they returned to the Lakota village, the people watched in silence. Tokala, wounded but upright, walked beside her. She helped him into their lodge. He sat, breathing slow. "I thought I'd lost you," she said. "You didn't," he whispered. "You reminded me who I am." She took his hand. "Then remind them." Outside, the drums began again. Not for war, but for return, for reckoning. And this time, she would be part of the circle. Not because of marriage, not because of treaties, but because she had chosen it. Because love, once unwelcome, had become the only thing strong enough to hold the fire together. The wind carried the scent of sage and ash across the open plains, soft as a memory and just as persistent. Spring had come in full now, the snow long melted, the rivers swollen with melted grief. Grass moved like 1,000 whispering tongues. Beneath the sun, and the Lakota camp breathed again, not quite at peace, but no longer holding its breath. The fires burned, the drums pulsed at dusk, and life, as it always did, carried on despite the scars it bore. Evelyn sat at the edge of the village, her skirts dusted with pollen, fingers weaving new patterns into a beaded sash. She had learned the rhythm of this land, of its silences and songs. The wind here no longer seemed angry, only wise. Her hair, no longer tightly bound in Eastern fashion, fell in loose waves down her back. There was no mirror, but she didn't need one to know she was no longer the girl who had been traded like a trinket to stop a war. She had become something else, someone new, born from fire and frost, and the steady heartbeat of a people she had once feared to know. Tokala walked slowly now, healing still, but unbowed. His wound had closed, but left behind a rigid scar along his side, like a mark carved by time. Some still called him traitor, and some called him brave. But most, now, said nothing, only watched as he moved through the camp beside the woman who had bled for him and spoken in his name when he could not. Together, they were no longer just a symbol of uneasy peace. They had become a choice, a daily, living decision to rebuild a bridge that had once burned. He joined her on the blanket where she sat, his shadow falling across her work. She looked up, blinking at the light behind his head. "Another council?" she asked. He nodded, lowering himself beside her with a quiet grunt. "Chief Red Cloud wants to speak to the settlers again. With you." She paused, fingers stilling over the beads. "Why me?" "Because they listen to you now, and so do we." The weight of it sat heavy on her chest. She had never asked to be a voice, but neither had Tokala, and he had carried burdens far heavier. They had both become things they never intended, emissaries, examples, reminders. But beneath it all, they remained two people trying to hold on to something that mattered. "I'll go," she said softly the next morning. They rode together her in a dress dyed with walnut and decorated with careful stitching, him in a leather vest marked with quiet authority. A small delegation followed behind them, warriors without war paint, scouts without aggression. They approached the edge of the settler town slowly, flags raised high, hands open. The town had changed. The fences reached farther now. More buildings had risen from the dirt like stubborn weeds. But there was less fear in the faces that watched. Them ride in, less suspicion in the way rifles were held. Captain James Willoughby greeted them at the outskirts, his hand outstretched, his hat pressed to his chest in a gesture of respect. "You look different," he said to Evelyn. "I am," she replied. They met in a field between the fort and the forest, where no blood had been spilled yet. A wide open space, unclaimed and sacred in its neutrality. The Lakota sat in a half-circle on one side, the settlers on the other. Evelyn and Tokala stood between them. Red Cloud spoke first, his words carried with deliberate calm through the translator. "The treaties are paper. Our trust is breath. Both are too easily broken," the settlers murmured. Willoughby raised a hand to quiet them. "We came to listen," he said. "Not to deny what's been done. There is much to repair." Evelyn stepped forward. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied as eyes turned toward her. "I was given to this man to stop a war," she said, gesturing to Tokala. "But I stayed with him because I found something stronger than fear. And in that strength, I learned the truth, that peace is not an agreement. It's not a bargain struck between men who shake hands with one and hold rifles with the other. It is a promise kept every day, even when it is hard, especially then." She looked to her father, who stood silently at the rear of the settler group. He looked older now, smaller somehow. Their eyes met but said nothing. "We can't undo what's been done," she continued. "But we can choose what happens next. You've seen what we've endured. Now decide if you will honor the sacrifice or make it meaningless." A long silence followed. Wind stirred the grasses. Birds circled overhead. Then Willoughby stepped forward. "We will hold to the treaty," he said, "and we'll walk with you this time, not ahead, not behind." Red Cloud nodded once. Tokala said nothing, but his fingers brushed Evelyn's hand once. Quick, a small gesture with the weight of a vow. On the ride back, the sun set in slow gold, casting long shadows that moved beside them like old ghosts being put to rest. Evelyn felt tired, but not burdened. There was no triumphant banner, no cheering crowd, just earth and air, and the thrum of horses beneath them. But that was enough. That night, they returned to the village under starlight. The people were waiting, not with fanfare, but with presence. A fire had been lit in the center. Old women hummed songs low and steady. Children held hands in silent curiosity. Tokala stepped into the circle. Evelyn followed. Red Cloud approached them. "The circle was broken," he said, his voice like stone. "But you did not let it die." He handed Tokala a small carved pipe, the wood polished smooth from years of handling. "You have earned the right to carry peace." Tokala accepted it with bowed head. Later, when the fire had died low and the village drifted to sleep, Evelyn and Tokala sat outside their lodge, the stars stretching wide above them like a never-ending road. He turned to her, his voice low. "You once asked me if I feared wolves." She smiled faintly. "You said no." "I lied. I feared the one inside me." She looked at him, eyes soft. "And now?" "I still fear him," Tokala said. "But I have learned not to feed him." She reached over, lacing her fingers with his. "You made me a promise," she said, "that if you didn't return, I was free. You did come back. So what am I now?" He studied her face, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You are free," he said. "But you are also mine, not because of treaty, not because of duty, Because I choose you, every sunrise. Her throat tightened. The tears didn't fall, but they shimmered. I choose you too, she whispered Dot, and they sat together in the dark, the fire inside them warm, steady, no longer flickering with fear, but glowing with certainty. Their love had not been born in ease or comfort. It had been forged in storms, in silence, in blood and bone and belief. It had not been expected or even wanted, but it had endured. And in that endurance, it had become unbreakable. The world would always be uncertain. Peace would always be fragile. But this day was a promise kept, and sometimes that was how wars were truly won.